Right, IoT security. We're all going to get hacked, apparently. If you value anything in your life, turn it off. In all seriousness, though, obviously there's been lots of discussion around the benefits of IoT, what it can enable by connecting everything. And we're starting to see what happens when you do connect them, some of the adverse effects of that as well. We saw Target get hacked pretty severely. We've seen car manufacturers, Mini and Jeep, and recently Barbie even has been a security threat that many of us probably didn't foresee. So what I'm hoping to do is try not to bombard you with scare stories, as a lot of IoT security presentations often are, and instead try and give you just a brief overview of why it's so complex, why we haven't found an answer straight away, and a little bit of a disclaimer from the word go. I'm not a technical guy. I'm an analyst, industry analyst, and so part of my job is to ask the questions and not always have the answers. So there's lots of questions in this presentation, of which I might not always know the answers, but hopefully by starting the conversation, we can start coming towards an answer. So I'm going to start off with just a general overview. Now, we've heard lots about the Internet of Things and how it can join things together. At Beecham Research, what we did is we developed this map, an IoT world of connected services, which kind of looks at the different subsectors of IoT and then breaks them up into their application groups and their different locations. I understand some of the ones around the outside are a bit difficult for those guys at the back to see, but that's not necessarily important. The important bits are sort of the bits in the middle. So when we looked at an M2M application in the past, now these have often normally just focused on each one of these service sectors or application groups. You know, so you saw an energy example within oil and gas, for example. Now, what IoT hopes to bring, and what the whole idea of IoT is to bring one M2M system with another M2M system. We've spoken about this. It becomes a system of systems. We get a value out of IoT by joining all together these things and getting an overview of getting an insight of what's going on. But what does this mean for security? Now, fortunately, we've come up with a not so complex diagram of IoT security to help demonstrate this. But in the middle, we've got our users and system operators. We're going to break this down. We're not just going to just talk about this as a whole here and hope you to digest it in one go. And then we've got our service sectors around the outside, our 9 service sectors, following by the platforms, networks, and edge devices. So if we just take that M2M example. So M2M, the challenges we found about managing the threats here have been somewhat easier, I guess. When you develop an M2M application, you've got a fairly narrow focus, what you want to do. The guys who architect it know, I know this is going to be used in this application, it's going to be used in this subsector, and it's going to be used by these people. I know these people are going to get access to it, these other people aren't. We're going to use this technology to transfer all this data. And so they can limit the vulnerabilities, they can limit the attack space. So as we see here, the correct focus on customer needs and minimized interfaces, and then maximize security control. Each one of these interfaces, why I keep bringing them up, is a potential vulnerability. Now we know most systems or most technologies work very well with one another. They're hopefully developed to be secure within one another. The weakness comes when you try and put two technologies together, that interface between the two of them. That's what we're trying to show here by these little squiggly red lines. Now, the issue that then comes also as well, that when security, the amount you spend on security is directly related to what it's actually protecting. You're not going to spend, or there's not going to be as much security, or you're not going to spend as much securing your own home sprinkler system as perhaps the city is that controlling the connected valve that's controlling the whole water system for the entire city. It doesn't make as much sense to spend all of that money just controlling your one little home sprinkler system that I can use from my app that I can get for a free or 69 pence application on any app store on Android or iOS. It doesn't make sense. But with M2M, again, you can apply that specifically. But IoT comes, when we bring an IoT application together, looks something more like this. So we're going to have a little wander. So as we, M2M, very easy to manage. it's just one simple thing. But when we bring IoT, we bring all these different things together. So let's say we've got a healthcare, an assisted home application here. Now that might want to bring in, find out what's going on within your own home. Maybe some wearables, you need to know what's going on there. It also fits into emergency services. They let them know if someone's fallen over. Also fits into transportation, buildings, energy. It brings all this stuff together. But then how do you control that? If, again, in my consumer home environment, I've implemented a layer of security, but is that necessarily the same level of security that should be implemented in the energy sector, in a smart grid? It wouldn't be sufficient. I don't think it would be particularly useful. Again, I'm not a technological guy, but I don't think I could implement a system that would secure an energy smart grid system. Equally, I wouldn't want those guys spending all their time securing my little home. But all of these things are connected. So again, we give the retail example with Target in the US, but they came through an HVAC provider. So that was a large retail example here that will take advantage of a weaker link in the energy sector. How do you secure against that? Do you take a one-size-fits-all approach at a huge cost, financial cost, for doing all, or do you just say, well, I'm going to implement a simple level of security here, and a much larger level of security over here, and I'm just going to secure all these bits in between? But how can you control every single one of these bits in between? There's so many. If I to look at all those connections in between that, there's more, and that's just what we can show on this diagram. Of course, we know in reality that that's exponentially larger. We also can't see every single attack vector. We're hearing about new ones every day. How do we control against that? It becomes a lot more complex. So this IoT security actually, it brings a lot more complexity. The increase in internal interfaces and associated vulnerabilities as a result of spreading a lot further. The variations between the service and subsectors, again goes back to this point, do I put a full bank vault level security on my home system, or a different area, what I implement in a healthcare system, is that the same thing I should implement in the home environment or other environments as well? Doesn't make sense. But the links in between, what we can see about bringing all this all together, means that you have to take it seriously. The final, what it means is we have to kind of take a layered approach. And by taking a layered approach, we need to look at every single sort of aspect. Now, I started off with a jokey point, but it's also very serious. You will be hacked. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. I think that's a sentiment that everyone sort of in this room understands. So it's a matter of what can you do once you get past that point. I was at the Internet of Things Security Foundation last week and listened to a fascinating talk by a chap who managed to hack a Tesla car. Now, once he was in, took him lots of times to get in. But once he breached that initial security, he opened a bunch of files up, and he found a file called keys. And in there were the keys, authentication keys, to beam back information to and from Tesla. Once he had those, he could access a whole bunch more information. So again, it comes down to this point. Just because I've secured the outside, have I secured all the little bits on the inside? Have I had the foresight to see that if someone does get in here, what access are they getting to? What access are they getting? Are they just getting access to my infotainment system if it's in a car? Or if they're in there, does that now allow them to come up with a lot more? The diagram behind there, if we allow different things to talk to one another across different sectors, well, do we allow them a level of trust, or do we just allow them to go through automatically, or do we have to ask for authentication? If we ask for authentication, we risk slowing it down. The value of IoT is that we range some kind of efficiency through automation. But that's going to become a lot more difficult if we ask for authentication at every single layer. But equally, if we just allow known traffic to walk through our doors, we end up with a Target example again. That's what happened there. So the whole rule of you're only as secure as your weakest link doesn't necessarily hold for IoT. So it's quite interesting as well, bringing as a another attribute to IoT that we'll go on to talk about in the next slide, just before we get into this, but is that people have access to your stuff a lot more. Now, again, at the last week, heard a fascinating talk about a guy who managed to get access to a Wi-Fi kettle, and by doing so, that was just simply from getting a kettle, opening it up, seeing, oh, what route does it run? Runs that. I'll look up what information's on Google, found the generic keys to get into it. From that, he managed to find the SSID and the password for the SSID. So it became just going from, oh, I'll just boil the kettle, can be a bit inconvenient when for someone, to I now have access to your whole home Wi-Fi system. Kind of scary. He then went on to show the same thing for a Samsung TV, for example. If anyone's got a Samsung TV, smart TV here, there's more bugs in it than the NSA can probably put in your own homes. So just watch out for that one. But another interesting example he gave was that he managed to hack a Wi-Fi, I think you call it, a Wi-Fi-enabled vibrator. I don't know why you'd want to do that. But the point is, he can gain access to your Wi-Fi through hacking something you think, no one's going to bother hacking this seemingly harmless device, depending on your views or opinions on that. So the other kind of things that IoT really brings to all of this is that it's combining all different forms of connectivity. We've spoken about Wi-Fi. We're talking a lot about telcos and the cellular they provide, but they'll also bring satellite together. You'll see all these, especially in the home, Zigbee and Z-Wave, all coming together. Now, again, goes back to my point about Wi-Fi talking to Wi-Fi, probably not the best example here, but has its own security protocols. What happens when you open that up to talk to satellite, when you talk to cellular? Again, it comes to all these little interfaces. You've got to start thinking about how you're going to connect all of these. And they're going to have new ones come out. And are they going to be developed with security from the word go? We saw the vulnerabilities that came through with Z-Wave and Zigbee early on, and they're working to patch those. They're a lot more secure now, but we're going to see more of those kind of things happening. So the increasing interoperability with other solutions, again, we've gone through this. IoT becomes a system of systems. If you can't secure a system with another system, it makes things a lot more complex. You've got to start looking at this stuff. And one of those systems is going to be enterprise IT. Now, interestingly, SAP has recently made a bunch of announcements on different partnerships it's making in order to secure its offerings. Because we're seeing that CRM-type solutions are becoming a real attack target for a lot of attackers. Because, again, they've been designed, a lot of them, on an architecture that hasn't developed since the 80s, 70s even. And it's becoming a lot different environment, and they're using a bunch of different clever stuff that just simply couldn't have been foreseen 30 years ago, 20 years ago. Other things, this optimization of operations, much larger amounts of data in real time. So again, I said this comes back to this point where if we were to add a layer of authentication to every single bit, does that slow things down? Now, in the financial industry, if you were to delay a real data transfer by a millisecond, every single second, you'd end up losing potentially millions of dollars a year. So do you put security over over functionality? This business critical, this mission critical side of things. That's the next point there. And as IoT becomes more of a nice to have, so a strategic necessity. Now, IoT, we're starting to see, we've spoken a lot about business models, how business models are evolving, how IoT can turn a product company into a services company. Now, if you're able to generate more recurring revenue, you want to do it. But if you can't secure it and it's going to cost you lots of money, is it worth doing? Again, it comes back to this point of security. The amount you spend on security is directly related to what you're securing. And finally, those different sort of data across the different boundaries we've spoken about when it comes to IoT applications that's bringing all different areas of sectors together. We're getting a much larger map, that horrible big green diagram we had up there earlier. There's one more I would add, which is that we're building stuff, and the connected car is a prime example, is what sparked my memory on this, is that how long is a car supposed to last? 20 years, roughly? How long does software last? 8, 10 years? Are we really going to be patching stuff 20 years old? Probably not. But it's something we're going to have to start thinking about with IoT. So with that, I'm actually going to draw a close there. We're going to hold questions till after Daniel's spoken. Well, one final point I'm going to make before I hand over to Daniel is that while security, I think, that again, these scare tactics and can often be seen as an inhibitor, I don't believe that there can be a substantial market for anything unless it's secure, unless it outweighs the risks of bringing that together. As such, security should be seen as an enabler rather than an inhibitor. Now, I don't have the answers to a lot of these things, but people are working towards it. Now, what happens, how you manage that data, how you manage that information, how you manage that security, that's a policy question. And fortunately, I believe Daniel's going to start talking about some of that stuff for you. Thank you.